everybody, welcome to Fiddlesticks and Stitches. I'm Fiddle and I'm sitting in the squeaky chair. Okay, fix the squeaky chair. Then we had attempt number three. Okay. Hi everybody, my name's Fiddle and I make stuff. And then I teach you how to make stuff. And we are getting back into miniatures today and I'm starting a Halloween project that's going to be kind of gruesome. But don't worry, that won't be until later and I will let you know when. You can see updates throughout the time, even in between videos, over on Patreon. That will also include the scavenger hunt and patterns. For those of you following along with the dragon, I will also be doing the same for it. And I am still working on it and have about one more video to go, but that'll be a minute yet. Today's project starts with a little story. Some months ago, I had made ribs out of cold porcelain clay and sent the pictures off to my Patreon, and she sent back, "You should do an Ed Gein scene or do something in the style of Ed Gein." Well, at the point in time, I didn't know who Ed Gein was. So I did some research and found out who he was and everything, and I said, okay, maybe I could do that for Halloween. And that's what we're starting with today. And I'll have the sync tutorial in here somewhere, but I don't know exactly where. I will show you or touch on the other pieces of furniture, but I didn't want to go too far with patterns and such for this because it's a shoebox, so it's specifically one certain size, and I don't know how universal that will be. However, the sink is a 1 by 1 inch base. So the bottom of the sink is a 1 by 1 inch square for the pattern that I gave you, which I think would be about good for miniature size sink. Last night I came up with a really good idea and I'm gonna try to at least make one, and I might need more Dollar Tree skeletons because they're really cool. There will be coming up within the next few episodes as well too. Okay, let's get started with this room box. First I took measurements of the box and made a poster board box from those measurements so I could basically decorate the box to put inside the shoebox. It saves on space and everything else. It makes it a whole lot easier. Next I used some scrap wallpaper left over from the dollhouse and gave myself some walls. For the flooring I'm going for a yoga mat. I didn't want to do carpet because I needed it to kind of be like a sanitary space, so I wanted this to be kind of like a concrete look. Then I painted the floor with a light gray color. Spray paint would be even better, but I don't have any other color spray paint than black. And the last time I used yoga mat for the flooring, I actually used gold as a base. It worked. My next mission is to use another type of floor mat for flooring, but I haven't found what I'm looking for yet. Once the gray layer was completely dry, I went back through with a watered down black and gave it a once over so all of the details in the mat showed. I do need to add another layer to this, but I haven't done it yet, and that final layer is going to be clear Elmer's glue and black paint with maybe a smidge of water, so that way it gives it a protective layer. The gray, I used a lot of cornstarch in it to thicken up the paint so we wouldn't be able to see the yoga mat. Downside of that is it kind of looks dry grainy, and I kind of want a shiny grainy. The black doesn't show up predominantly like it does here. It's actually quite light. So if I add the glue with the water and black paint, the glue will give it the shiny layer and the black will pull into the deeper spots and give it more definition. At least that's my theory. And I'm gonna try it and I'll let you know how it goes because I gotta do something. It really is too light. Next, I started working on the door. First, I drew it onto a piece of paper the size that I wanted it. Then I folded it in fourths and used my ruler and measured, I think, like 2/8 of an inch, maybe even a quarter, space in the center of all the squares so I can make sure they were all the same length and the same width apart. Next, I took the pattern that I made and cut out all of them, which In all technicality, I really didn't have to, but it did help me transfer marks over to my piece of poster board, which is originally what the door is made out of. Next, I traced out the rectangles onto poster board, cut them out, and then I sanded them before I glued them down because I wanted to have a little bit of a beveled edge on all of them to kind of give it more of a door look. Now that I had the door built, I needed to make a frame for it. This time I grabbed a piece of corrugated cardboard and traced out the door. Next, I used a scrap of wood to make sure that I had a gap around the door the same width. Then I trimmed it. For the inside of the door, I took a box cutter, craft knife, whatever you want to call it, and cut just through the top and the corrugation, not through the very bottom piece of cardboard. Once I was through those two layers, I peeled them off very slowly and carefully so I didn't take any of the door frame that was staying. After I checked my fit, I went around the door frame with tape. This closed in the open sides so you wouldn't be able to see them. I checked the fit, then sanded down the edges of the tape to try to blend it in a little bit. Once I had the door finished, I set it aside because I did all of the painting at once. I went ahead and moved on to the next piece that I wanted to make, and that was the sink. And that's where our tutorial comes in. If you are ready, go ahead and grab your piece of aluminum. It would need to be 3 by 5 inches. If you have indents or line markings from manufacture, use a hard round tool to smooth all those out. Just make sure whatever surface you're doing that on is also smooth, otherwise the lumps and bumps will carry over to the aluminum. I use the Dollar Tree chalk marker lid as my tool. We will be starting with the top left hand corner of your pattern. Because of time and repetitiveness in video, I'm going to show you how to do the part 1, and then you can do part 2 on your own, which will give you the whole graph for part 3, and we'll come back and cut for part 4. And I'll have the guide up in the corner so you can follow along with it. Also, if you do not have a craft mat that is big enough for you to do this on, I made the pattern universal so you can print it out and trace it onto whatever you need. And I try to do that with all of my patterns, but I think they tend to run a little big, and that also may vary with different printers as well. You will want to tape your piece of aluminum down on your craft mat to where you're lined up with your craft mat lines. Then use a tool to mark out your lines. A ballpoint pen would be really good. I wouldn't use anything too overly pointy because you don't want to puncture your aluminum. You just want to make an indent for where you need to fold your lines or cut depending. Once you have all of your grid pattern laid out, we can cut the overall outside shape off by cutting off the squares that are red in the first picture. Okay, I should have gave the warning beforehand. It's a little late now. But if you have a problem with getting cuts or you are worried about getting cut, which very much can happen with working with this aluminum. Please wear gloves. Now that we've gotten the overall shape, we need to cut our tab pieces. These are the ones that we're going to use to help hold it together. And remember, only cut the red portion of the line, not all the way across. For the next part, you get to decide on what direction you want to go with it. As you can see on my sink, I have this rounded edge up front, and if you wanted to carry that over and have it in between the sinks as well, where it gives it a little thickness there, you can use a toothpick while you are folding your pieces. But be mindful that this is just thin aluminum, so the more you bend it, the easier it will be to break. And it will also make your sink a little shallower than half an inch deep. And because I think if I tried to explain it step by step, it'll make it a little more confusing, I am just going to put some music on and let you watch how I bend it rather than me explain it. Once I had all of my side tabs folded, I used tape and super glue and baking soda to hold it into its final shape. Then I moved on to making the counter. I didn't give the pattern for the counter because everybody's would be different on what their space is. To make sure that the hole for the sink itself is the right size, I traced the bottom of it onto my cardstock, which will be my counter. To cut the shape for the sink out, I went corner to corner making triangle points that I folded inwards and I glued to the side of the sink to help keep it in place. Then I folded and glued the sides of the counters down to give the skirting on the side like there is the front. Then I folded the back top piece for the backsplash of the counter. I used clamps to hold it together while it was drying, and because I have that lip on the front, I was able to just slide it over top. Then I used super glue and baking soda to hold it in place. It gave it like a grainy look on the front of it, and I think that's going to help with the look overall when it's done. I cut and glued 5 wood legs in place. I put 3 along the front and 2 on each corner. I noticed that there was crease marks along the back wall, so I took a skinny dowel and glued it along that seam, and it covered those up so you couldn't tell. Then I gave everything a coat of paint, but I wanted to try to keep it simple. The last thing to do was add a doorknob to the door, and I used a studded earring for that. If you've made it this far, thank you for being here. Next week's tutorial will be the surgery table and cart. As always, thank you, Ginger, and see you next time.